Today I'm going to be talking about an introduction to the Romantic period, which is our first unit for 204, just the second part of British literature. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about some historical context for the time period and some characteristics for literature of the time. Towards the end of 203, we kind of touched a little bit when we talked about William Collins and a couple of the female writers there at the end of the 17th and 18th centuries, where we came from at the end of 203. We touched a little bit on Romanticism and the brief influences we saw of that there towards the end of the neoclassical period. But today we're going to do a deep dive into the Romantic period and kind of get some context for moving forward into the literature of the time. So began in the late 1700s, lasted through the mid 1800s. Several things that were going on during the time period, obviously, were the Industrial Revolution and the French Revolution as well. And so, Britain was becoming, very industrialized, kind of had a bustling economic growth there, a lot of factories and um, uh, machinery and technology of the time period, and everything was really changing a lot. People were moving to the cities, moving away from, a simpler times and simpler pursuits of pleasure, and moving to a more um, mechanical industrialized, world. And so that really had an impact um, on a lot of writing of the time period, and obviously the French Revolution as well, where you had a lot of power struggle and oppression and of your French peasant class and the leaders, the aristocrats of the time period. So Romanticism was a movement that revolted against the neoclassicism of the Augustan age. That's, the neoclassicism. We kind of went over that at the end of 203, and that's where writers were kind of trying to replicate the ancient classics. The Greeks, Virgil, Horace, Homer, and their kind of rigid writing styles, where we talked about neoclassicism focusing on rational thought, and that writing was kind of a product of intellect and knowledge and not fancy and imagination. The German poet Friedrich Schlegel first coined the term romantic to define literature, stating that it was literature that depicts emotional matter in an imaginative form. So, overall, romantic authors look to the imagination and nature as sources of insight and inspiration. They valued sentimental, heartfelt feelings and emotional experiences over historical and scientific facts, and writers expressed a great reverence for nature. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that people were moving to the cities, and the cities were kind of springing up and growing rapidly. And it was kind of a throwback, like a way back to that simpler time of life, and the natural, reminding them of the natural world that they left behind when they moved to the cities, and the industrial revolution started really kind of taking over. And we'll see that when we read several of the poems for this time period, just reminding people of the simplicity of nature and the healing powers of nature that they had moved away from. They also believe that intuition and emotion and imagination were more instructive than empiricism and reason, moving away from that neoclassicism, neoclassicist beliefs um, of the period before. So, some characteristics that we're going to see in our writing for this unit are going to be imagination, emotion, and creativity, the beauty and power and healing properties of nature. Individualism, romantic love, love of freedom and for freedom, spirituality and supernaturalism, and a simplicity of style. And we'll kind of just kind of break those down a little bit into their component parts, just really quick for you. So, writers stress the imaginative and subjective side of human nature and believe that imagination was superior to reason, away from that that rebellion against that neoclassicist belief system. So, characters' thoughts and feelings and inner struggles and opinions and dreams and passions and hopes, all of those things are going to come into play where they have not been in play before. Writers don't allow facts and truths to inhibit them from expressing their ideas. And William Wordsworth probably summed it up best, when he said that all good poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And we're going to see a lot of that feeling and emotion and beliefs and passions and those kinds of things really kind of overflowing in a lot of the poetry of this and text of this time period. So for the beauty of nature, writers explore the intense beauty of nature and invest natural events and objects with a divine presence. They believe that being alone and in solitude in nature was a very cathartic and healing process where they divined a lot of their inspiration and their peace and their spirituality from. They understood progress and the changing tide towards industrialization. However, they prioritize natural beauty over that urbanization and commercialism and materialism that was really prevalent during the Industrial Revolution. Part of that had to do with the fact that they were, writing at this time. So, like I just said, the big cities, factories are springing up, manufacturing processes are changing society, and people are moving further and further away from that natural world, the natural world. So, they felt like it was their task and their purpose to kind of remind everybody of the importance of that the importance of nature or the individual. So romantic writers began turning their gaze inward, valuing the individual experience above all else, and writers kind of really believed in the power of looking inward and being reflective and choosing your own path and relying on your own resources. They valued independent thinking, creativity, self-reliance. They asserted the importance of the individual, the unique, and even the eccentric. They often elevated the achievements of the misunderstood, heroic individual outcast. And with that individualism, we're going to see a lot of um, a lot of people alone and not really loneliness, maybe more solitude. That is a melancholy and trying to get in touch with your inner self and that kind of thing in a lot of the texts that we're going to take a look at. Romantic love, we talked about Arthurian romance back in the day when we were studying medieval or early literature. This kind of piggybacks off of that, the idea of romantic love. So characters are experiencing deep, unbridled, emotional, and passionate love. They're not going to marry out of convenience or involve themselves in something stagnant. And if they do, all hope is lost. Like woe is me. It's going to be intensely wistful and amorous. There, those types of relationships in the poetry. The love of freedom, this is really influenced by the French Revolution, which was happening at the time. So there's going to be an emphasis of liberty and freedom. Uh, Poets were rebels against tyranny and brutality. And they saw that in the whole idea of the French Revolution, those tyrants and despots, Marie Antoinette, and that whole idea of let them eat cake, where the aristocracy were lording their wealth over the impoverished peasants there in France. And so this romanticism is going to be kind of a freedom cry, and not only um, like in regards to like the French Revolution, but also like the desire for freedom from the past literature where they had to not be able to use their imagination and they couldn't really assert their feelings and their emotions. And this is the literature of the time is definitely going to be an expression of freedom from reason and feeling and a revival of feeling and emotion and imagination. Romantic inward writers turn inward, valuing the individual experience above all else. We talked about that, which led in turn to a heightened sense of spirituality. And then piggybacking off of that are going to be the addition of the occult and supernatural elements. You think about, I mean, he's not a British writer, but you think about Poe, and during the, Gothic romance here in America. But you think about Poe and his love, lost love for Lenore and the Raven, or in Isabel Lee, I'm sorry, Annabelle Lee, Lord, Annabelle Lee, where he's pining after his lost love who is dead, and that influence. You're going to see that in a lot of these Wuthering Heights, those kinds of things. You're going to see that play a part in the writing of the time period because it lends an air of mystery and wonder, right, and kind of elevates the writing. And then last but not least, a simplicity of style. So William Wordsworth was one of the first poets to kind of embrace this idea that writing should be enjoyed and read and understood by anyone. The common man, the everyday man, should be able to pick up a poem and understand, it shouldn't be so flowery and florid and ridiculously written that the common man, the simple man, could not read it and understand it. And so he kind of rebuffed those classical works where you had that overly stylized languages, and you had allusions to the Greek and Latin writings, and in favor of emotional imagery that was conveyed in simple, elegant language that everybody could understand. So, looking forward to breaking down the text from this time period for us here in Unit 1, and we'll keep these characteristics and that historical context in mind as we move forward into the literature of the Romantic period.